Hello, Sin and Space listeners. There's a couple content warnings for this week's episode. Number one is a child kidnapping. Secondly, there's pretty graphic descriptions of somebody with chronic pain trying to move around. And thirdly, character death. So please skip this episode if any of these things are particularly triggering for you, but otherwise, enjoy. Thanks a lot. Sin and Space, Chapter 20. Joan Radcliffe lay almost peacefully, drugging herself against the pain in her limbs and head by a familiar reverie of which she never tired. She saw a Sun-Lake colony at some vague time in the future, a city of God, glowing against the transfigured Martian desert, spring into the Martian air, with angelic beings vaguely recognizable in some way as the original colonist. Her Hank, the bold explorer, with a bare-chested, archaic, sword-girt look. Dr. Tony, calm and wise and very old, soothing ills with miraculous lotions and calming troubled minds with dignified counsel. Mimi Jonathan, revered and able, disposing of this and that with sharp, just terseness. Anna Willendorf, mothering hundreds serenely. Brave Jim and Polly Candro and their wonderful child, the hope of them all. She wasn't there herself, but it was all right, because she had done something wonderful for them. They all paused and lowered their voices when they thought of her. She, the sick and despised, had in the end surprised and awed them all by doing something wonderful for them, and they paid her memory homage. Nagging reality, never entirely silent, jeered at her that she was a useless husk draining the colony's priceless food and water, giving nothing in return. She shifted on the bed. She wished Anna hadn't left, and swallowed the thought painfully. Anna's time belonged to the colony and not to her. It was nasty of her to want Anna to stay with her so much. She straightened one puffy leg and felt a lance of pain shoot from toes to groin. She bared her clenched teeth, but didn't let a whimper escape her. "That was very good," said the tempter. "None of them could do that." Anna had propped her up in bed before, so she could look out the window. Now she turned her head slowly and looked out. "I see through the window," she told herself. "I see across the colony street to a corner of the Candros, but with a little of the street-side window showing. I see Polly Candro cleaning the inside of the window, but she doesn't see me. Now she's coming out and cleaning the outside of the window. Now she turns and sees me and waves, and I smile. Now she takes her cloth and goes around her hut to clean the back window, and I can't see her any more. And now something glides down the colony street with Sonny Candro in its thin brown arms. And now Polly runs around her hut again, her face white as chalk, tries faintly to call me, wave to me, and falls down out of sight. Joan knew what she ought to do, and she tried. The intercom button had been put in, so she had only to move her hand a few inches. She reached out for the button and held her fingers on it, but there was no answering click. It was a few seconds and maybe minutes, and the thing that had stolen Polly's baby was gone down the other end of the street. The sick girl sat up agonizingly and thought, "I can do something now. They won't be able to say I was foolish, because if I wait any longer I won't be able to catch up. It will be too far away. There's nobody else to do it except Polly, and she fainted. It has to be done right away. I can't wait for them to answer and then come from the lab." Joan stood up, stumped over to the canteen on the wall, and tilted it for a long, long drink of cool water. It tasted good. She lurched out of the hut and stood for a moment, looking at the crumpled body of Polly. "Poor Polly," she thought as her heart thudded and faltered. "We must help one another." She shaded her eyes against the late morning sun and looked up and past the colony streets through the clear Mars air. There was a moving dot passing the airfield now, and she started after it, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, as the city of God reformed in her mind, and her eyes never left the moving dot. She wept convulsively at the pain in her limbs as she stumped across the desert rocks. They sliced her bare feet, but she dared not look down ahead of her for fear of losing that swimming, moving dot she followed. Magic, she thought. Fix a fairy with your eye, and away it cannot fly. Her heart, she could feel it thudding ponderously as a massive new pain burned through her left shoulder and arm. "I have done what I could," she thought. "Hank, you are free." She fell forward and dragged her sprawled right arm along the ground so it pointed to the moving dot and the Rimrock Hills beyond it. Somebody grabbed him by the arm and motioned to his helmet. Tony stared a moment, uncomprehending, then switched on the helmet radio. "What's up?" Joan Radcliffe! It was one of Mimi's young assistants in the lab office. She picked up the intercom and buzzed it. When I answered, it went dead. I'll be right out. The doctor made it on the double, in spite of the hampering suit, out of the shipping room and into the shower. He would have given a year of his own life to be able to speed up the decontamination process this one time, but he'd been near the open crates. It wouldn't help Joan if he exposed himself, and her too, to radiation disease. He ran the distance from the lab to the street of houses. He was almost running when he approached the Candros hut and almost missed seeing Polly's limp figure in the road. Thoroughly bewildered, he picked her up and looked around for help. There was no one in sight. A moment's indecision, and then quickly he carried Polly toward the Radcliffe hut and deposited her gently on the wall bunk in the living room. Pulse and respiration okay. She would keep. He headed for Joan's bedroom. The doctor wasted a scant second staring at the empty bed. To him it seemed an endless time that had gone by. He pressed the intercom button and waited through another eternity till the lab answered. Whatever had happened, whatever mysterious force had removed Joan from her bed and left Polly unconscious in the street, this, he realized, must have been the ultimate agony for Joan. To lie in this bed, in dreadful haste, to press this button and wait until it was too late. That you, Doc? What's up? Trouble. Get Jim Candro out here. To the Radcliffes. And get Anna. Send her to Candro's. There's no one with the baby. Is Mimi there? Put her on. Tony? The lab administration's crisp voice was reassuring. He could leave part of the problem, at least, in her competent hands. There's trouble here, Meme. Don't know what, but Polly's fainted and Joan's disappeared. I'll be right there. She hung up. Tony retreated one step toward the living room, had an afterthought, and went back to the intercom. Get Cantrella here, too, he told the lab office. Tell him to bring along the EEG setup, fast. Polly didn't look too bad. Mark in again? He'd know soon. What was going on? Jim Candro burst in, panting and terrified. His wide eyes went from his wife to the doctor, and a single miserable word came from him. Again? I don't know. She fainted. Take her home, then look at Sonny. Anna's on her way over to help you. Jim left, with his burden on his arms, and Tony returned to the sick girl's bedroom. There was no trace, no clue, nothing he could find. He saw the wall canteen upended and went toward it with excitement. A puddle of water on the floor. Incredible carelessness for Sun Lake, but it meant something. Joan hadn't been carried away. She'd gone herself. She had stopped for water and left the canteen this way. A heartbroken shout from across the street sent him running out of the house over to the Candros. The living room was empty. In the bedroom, Polly lay alone, still unconscious. He found Candro in the new nursery, squatting on the floor beside the baby's empty crib, rocking in misery.